What?
Do your hands, does the person have to have dry hands when he starts washing? Or does he have to dry
Okay, we're coming to this, yeah. Okay, so we're learning yesterday about Netilas Yadayim, that you're supposed to, if you're a right-handed person, you pick up the cup in your right hand, transfer it to the left hand, wash your right hand first. If you're a left-handed person, according to the Samach Tzedek, you wash your left hand first. So therefore you pick it up in your left, you give it to the right, and then you wash the left hands first. Now the din is as follows. When you wash your hand, we learned you have to, with yesterday we learned what type of keli, it has to be complete, and no holes and no cracks, and that it pours out easily over the whole hand. Now, your hands before you wash must be dry. You can't dry, or for that matter, you have to make sure your hands are clean. If somebody, let's say, has dirt under the nails, they can't wash with it. It's a chatzitza. Under most circumstances. There are a few exceptions to the rule. But you have to make sure your hands are clean. So let's say you have ink. You know, you do a lot of writing, so you have ink on your hands. Or you're a mechanic and you have a lot of this dirt on your hand that doesn't come off. So the halacha is like this. If you don't care about it, because that's your profession and you're used to it, like teachers, a lot of times will have ink on their fingers and they don't care because that's their profession, they always get it, then it's not a chatzitza. If a person does care about it, then it's a chatzitza, it's a separation, and we learned there can't be any separation between the hand and the water when it washes the hand. Now your hand has to be completely dry, your hand has to be dry before you start washing. Now, this can happen sometimes, and you have to be very careful. What happens, you started washing, so let's say you washed your right hand, and you didn't wash your left hand yet. And by mistake, your unwashed left hand touches your washed right hand. While it's still wet, the din is, it's not valid, you impurified the water on the right hand, you have to dry your hands, and then rewash. Or, let's say you washed both hands, and then you're giving the cup to somebody else to wash, and by mistake, they touched your hand. Even a finger, they touched your hand while it was still wet. The din is, you have to dry your hands, rewash. What happens if you already made the bracha? You have to dry your hands, rewash, but you don't make a bracha. Okay, so it's very careful. You have to be very careful that when you wash, make sure your hand that's not washed doesn't touch the hand that's washed, or a hand that wasn't washed touches the hand while they're still wet. Okay, so that's a very practical thing that people...
Your hands are dry and somebody that didn't wash touch your hand?
No, if the hand's dry, it doesn't matter. You didn't wash it yet.
No, after you wash, and let's say somebody touched your hand.
After you dried your hands?
You dry your hand, if before washing, you after washing.
So if the hands are dry, but the evidence is not a problem. Some people are machmed that they don't, but most 95%, 99% of the people are makel. But if the hands are wet, then it's not a valid washing. You have to dry your hands and rewash properly.
So Rabbi, if your hand is wet, you just wash it and you don't hold the handle again, right? For a lot of people that won't use a napkin, for example, is that the problem?
Yeah, it's a very valid point. Because of that, if you want to do it right, so if you don't use a napkin or a towel, whatever, so then, halachically, you should make sure the handles are dry before you wash. People are not careful in that, because with the evid, it's okay. But l'chatchila, if you wash for bread, and somebody just used the quart, and the handles are wet, you really halachically should dry them first before you wash the hands.
What's the concern?
Because again, the water is carrying tumah.
Question.
What?
For the work that you do in the morning, 1 and 1, you also have to make sure your hands are dry before?
Yeah. No, you have to dry. You have to dry your hands before you wash them. Yeah.
Is it just the first set of water that's carrying tumah, and after a minute would be, can you, instead of drying the handles, if you don't have a way to dry it, can you just wash them down?
Again, b'di'evid, you can use the kvart even if it's wet. It's a b'di'evid though. So people don't wash it down. That's not...
Can you refill the water in the middle of washing?
Yeah, sure. Most people do because the kvart is not usually, well, it depends how much water you want. The Gemara says, whoever is not meticulous in the Netilas Yadayim, kol mezalzel ben Netilas Yadayim, boli de anius, comes to poverty. Another place says nekem and oilam, but it says you come to poverty. In fact, it's brought down in Tzvarim that the bracha we say al Netilas Yadayim, al is ayin, Netilas is nun, and Yadayim is yud, which is oni. So they say it's even a hint in the bracha. We say al Netilas Yadayim because we learned the other day, because Netila, we don't say rechitzas Yadayim, because Netila means with a keli. So because you use a keli, so you use the word Netila.
Then you're touching the faucet, like a daddy.
So again, people will try to close the faucet either with the napkin or whatever reason it is. There was an interesting thing. Again, there's a sikha in the earlier years of the Rebbe, maybe Tavshin the Bais, somewhere around there, that years ago it was something to wash with a towel. It was a very exclusive club that did it. The Rebbe speaks about the sikha and says nowadays everybody can wash with a towel, but most people when they wash with a towel, they wash with a towel for the second hand or the napkin, right? But if you watch them, we saw the Rebbe wash many times by the Fabrengas when it was Yom Tiv. The Rebbe held the towel for both times. Now, even before he washed the right hand, he was holding it with the towel. He never held on to the actual handles; it was always with the towel. But again, very few people do that today. We just map it that when you wash your hands, because it's wet, you use a napkin or a towel or whatever.
You think you picked it up with the right hand with the towel?
It was all with a towel. Yeah.
Isn't it when you pick it up?
You can't, they don't, but there are movies of the Rebbe washing because there's a few times, normally the Rebbe only washed Matzah Yom Tov, before Yom Tov was over. But there were times, Vav Tishrei, Tavshin Lamed, the Rebbe washed by the Fabrengen, I think it was the Yud Shvat. One time the Rebbe washed, there was what the Rebbe once washed in the Sukkah for the rally, for the, the release time kids. There were a few times that the Rebbe washed, that there are videos of the Rebbe washing.
Can we see it?
What?
Can we see it?
Yeah, go look.
Rabbi,
What?
after you wash your hand, you touch a lot of other things, including take the challah cover off.
That's when your hands are dry already.
Oh, that's okay.
Once it's dry, it's not a problem. So now, what's the proper... What?
Is there anything we shouldn't touch when it's dry now?
The minhag is people touch, but there's a lot of times by Fabrengas when the Rebbe washed and people came over to him to give Shalom Aleichem, so if it was from people, the Rebbe said, I washed. So.
Till the end of the
Yeah, but Lepel, nobody's mechman there. But, okay, so now you wash your hands. Okay, so let's discuss the proper way of washing your hands if you're a right-handed person. If you're left-handed, it's just the opposite way. Okay, you pick up the cup in your right hand, give it to the left. You wash 3 times, make sure each time covers all the way to the wrist. Okay, our custom is 3 times, some people do twice, but Chabad custom is 3 times. And then you wash the second hand 3 times, and then there's a little bit of water left. And then you do what's called the shfifa. While you start making the bracha before the shfifa. Shfifa is when you're rubbing your hands together. Okay? Some people say after the shfifa you do it, the bracha before. Our meaning is right after you wash by the shfifa, when you're starting to do with a little bit of water that you left in the hand. When you wash, so then you rub your hands like this. Our custom is to pick it up to above the heart level, and then like this. Because what's the point over here is like this. Normally, you're supposed to make a bracha before you do the mitzvah. Before you do a mitzvah, you have to make the bracha. The Gemara learns it out in Psachim that you have to make a bracha evel asiyasim. The Gemara learns it out from Psukim. You have to make a bracha before you do the mitzvah. The logic behind it is very simple. Once you did the mitzvah already, you're not commanded anymore. So how can you make a bracha? Hashem commanded us to do it. You already did it. So you can't, like if somebody takes a lulav and esrog and the mitzvah is shaking it, and they shake it without a bracha, and then they can't make a bracha anymore. What do you say? We commanded? You're not commanded anymore, you did it. So normally, you're supposed to do brachas before you do a mitzvah. There's two exceptions to this. Well, really three, but one doesn't apply. Well, mikvah and netilas yadayim. If you think about it, before we wash the hands, we should make a bracha, shekachanu b'mitzvah v'tzvanu al netilas yadayim, and then begin washing the hand. Because then the bracha is before the mitzvah. The same thing before you go into the mikvah, or whatever, let's say for a woman. So ideally, before she tovels, she should make the bracha. So mikvah and netilas yadayim are exception to the rule. Why is it exception to the rule? Because your hands are impure. You're becoming impure. You're becoming pure. So why would you make the bracha if you're impure, if you're becoming pure? You have to make the bracha before you do the mitzvah. So therefore, the din is like this. Part of the mitzvah of washing your hand is rubbing the hands together. That's part of the mitzvah. So when you wash your hands and you start the bracha before you rub your hands together with a little bit of water, so then you did the bracha before you did the mitzvah. And the same thing, the Gemara speaks about by a tefillah of a ged. The finishing process of a ged, of a convert, is you have to go milah, if it's a man, and tefillah in the mikvah. A woman is tefillah. So the question is, when does a person who's becoming a ged, when does he make the bracha? So it says in halacha, he can't make a bracha before because he's still a guy. When does he become a Jew? When he finishes the immersion. That's what makes him a Jew, the final process. So he can't make a bracha because he's still a guy. So over there he has no choice, he has to make it afterwards. Or even by a woman when they table, so they table once and then they make a bracha, and then they table the rest, so it's still before the actual process.
You dry your hand after finishing the bracha or in the middle of after rubbing your hand if you are in the middle of the bracha?
No, you make the bracha after you dry your hands.
After drying your hands?
No, I'm sorry, before.
Before.
You make the bracha, you're rubbing your hands while you're making the bracha, and then you dry the hands. Which is also actually, which is also actually part of the mitzvah, because you're not allowed to eat bread with wet hands from the washing. Gemara says, you're eating tamidik bread. So therefore, so it's all part of the drying is part of the mitzvah. Everything is part of the mitzvah. Now the poskim discuss what happens. I don't have towels. Can I just let my hands dry, air dry? Not with those machines, I don't have. So you can't rub it on your clothing because it's kosher l'shikha, we learned, right? So what do? So most poskim say if your hands air dry, it's still good. It's still dry, and you did the mitzvah. No. What did you want, Moshe?
When we do alternately washing, do we follow the same stringencies as
Yeah.
like in the bread?
Why do I have to throw out the napkin?
What do you want to do with it?
We'll take it to my table and use it.
You don't have to throw it out.
And see everybody goes to the
But
table.
practically speaking,
All right, so the guy will take it to the table.
you don't have, huh?
I take it to the table and I use it for
Or you can use it to dry your hands also.
What is it?
No, he says when you wash, the napkin they use to wash, and they usually throw in the garbage before. This is a portion. No, you can,
or after. And
whatever, you can use it to dry your hands, you can use it by the meal.
is there a difference between netilas yadayim and shtifas yadayim when you dip it in?
If you dip it, shtifas yadayim, he even talks about it. The Vaad Rebbe talks about it. In Kitzur, he says, yeah, if you do it in, yeah. So he holds it, Vaad Rebbe holds this also. No, here he says, okay, here he says you make al netilas yadayim. The Vaad Rebbe holds you make al tfilas yadayim, but if you made al netilas yadayim, you yaitza.
And as far as drying it?
Same thing. What do you mean? You have to dry the hands. Or let them air dry.
What water is kosher to dip your hands into? If you see a man made lake, is that a kosher?
What?
Anything that's kosher for a mitzvah would certainly be kosher, right?
Yes.
But if it's a man-made lake, which is
No.
Or a lake, it's questionable.
So it's in Tzidam, Vaad Rabbonim, you could be makel. Then it's a philosophic, you could do it.
And a little stream, a brook or a river, I need those.
No, it has to be, here he says also, Benar or b'mitva koshel tfilas nashim. Or b'mayim, because mayim is kosher even b'koshel, if it's a well. But you can't just put your hand in a swimming pool. It's not a kosher mikveh. Okay, okay, we said that you have to make sure it's clean.
But in the ocean you could, no?
Ocean. The ocean is a biblical mikveh. If you look in Chumash,
But you said bracha netilat.
one second, if you look in Chumash, when Hashem created the seas, it says, Ule mikveh hamayim kore yamim.
Yes.
The Torah calls a yam a mikveh. You can't get better than the Torah saying it's a mikveh.
No, practically, to get close to the ocean, put your hands out if you're wearing your shoes or if you're dressed. People, can you wait till the wave comes and put your hands in on the water that's returning? Or do you have to get the wave when it's coming out? You're risking getting wet. So you're getting...
Kivin sho'arva aleh gal, Torah.
So that's when it's coming in or also when it's returning?
Doesn't matter. If it's a kosher mikveh this year, that's it.
Mikveh is not noun, it's plural. Mikveh Shem is like sin, it's not noun.
I understand, but the yam Hashem called the mikveh. Machat shin zin ha-mesim ha-mechah b'eva ma'in kim shivla gal teref on the gashem et.